everyone. Thank you for coming here today. My name is Specialist Esposito, and today I'll be providing you with an informative brief. Today's briefing is in fact unclassified. It can be shared and communicated with just about anyone. And the subject of today's brief is going to be this: stewardship of the profession. Now, put the bottom line up front. Soldiers are stewards of the profession. Now, to understand this concept, you have to understand 4 key points. And those points are: what is the Army profession? What is an Army profession? What is stewardship? And how do soldiers fill the role of stewards? Now, going on to the first point, the Army profession. So the Army profession is outlined in Army Doctrine Publication 6-22, which is Army Leadership and the Profession, and it's covered in Chapter 1. So, Chapter 1 gives this description of the Army profession. The Army profession is a trusted vocation of soldiers and Army civilians whose collective expertise is the ethical design, generation, support, and application of land power, serving under civilian authority and entrusted to defend the Constitution and the rights and interests of the American people. So, that definition might seem quite a bit wordy and might not say a lot to those of you who don't really understand what that means. To put it into a more distilled term, the Army profession is what the Army does. This is everything that is done generally throughout the entire Army and is ubiquitous to all soldiers, to what is done uniquely and individually across MOSs. Now, and that is everything that we do in order to accomplish our mission. Now, to better understand the Army profession, you have to really understand the history of the Army profession and where it comes from. And so, the Army profession began when the Army did, which was June 14th, 1775. And the Army was established as the Continental Army, and it was established by the Second Continental Congress. And the reason that they established the Continental Army was because they needed this force in order to defend against the military of Great Britain, which had been sent to the then 13 colonies in order to impose British rule by force. Now, I cannot overstate what a monumental task this is that had been put towards this newly formed army. And it soon became apparent to that army. Now, every engagement in the beginning phases of the war made one thing very clear to the Continental Army: that the British were a professional force and that the Continental Army was not. And it became abundantly clear that if the Continental Army did not also become a professional force, they stood a very real chance of losing the war and failing in their mission. Now, so, because it was determined that the Army needed to develop itself as a profession, and that's exactly what it did. And it did this during Valley Forge, when General Washington encamped his troops there for the winter. Now, what had happened is that the Continental Congress had commissioned a Prussian military officer whose name was Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. He had been commissioned in order to train General Washington's army, and that's exactly what he did. So, what did Baron von Steuben do in order to make this army a professional army? He took a corps of soldiers and he trained them in essential soldiering skills. He trained them in drills. He trained them in how to maintain their equipment and their weapons. He trained them how to take care of soldiers. And what he did that was more important than all those skills he trained them in is he trained them how to teach those skills to the rest of the army. And that's exactly what happened. Those soldiers that were taught by Baron von Steuben went on to train the rest of the Continental Army at Valley Forge. And what happened after that winter encampment was done and they resumed their operations against the British? It was staggering. The Continental Army was able to match the British, blow for blow, shot for shot, and they went toe-to-toe with them. And at the end of the war, they had secured the independence of this nation. So, once that was done, they essentially had also started what continues today, which is a history of excellence. So now that you understand what the Army profession is and where it comes from, it raises a question. If there's an Army profession, does that mean there's an Army professional? And the answer is yes, there is an Army professional. So what is the Army professional? The Army professional is that soldier that lives the Army profession. Now, to put that into terms, that the Army professional is that soldier that is proficient in their warrior tasks and drills. The Army professional is that soldier that lives up to the Army values and maintains the standard. The Army soldier is that professional that carries on a tradition of excellence. And so, now that we've covered the Army profession and the Army professional, now it's time to get into stewardship. So, Merriam-Webster gives the definition of stewardship as the office, duties, and obligations of a steward. More specifically, it defines those offices and duties as the conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful, responsible management of something that has been entrusted to one's care. For soldiers, as stewards of the profession, it means the careful management and responsible care of that Army profession that has been entrusted to them, which has been entrusted to them by the American people and by the soldiers that came before them and has developed that Army profession that they have inherited. To kind of give you a better idea of stewards, a couple examples of what a steward could be is such as a park ranger who maintains and preserves natural areas and parks within our nation. Or it could also be a librarian who keeps the knowledge archived and organized within the library. One thing librarians do to help kind of better understand stewardship and how it will apply to soldiers is they also seek to expand their libraries, get new texts and more information. That's an important element of stewardship, as we will go on. So, now that we've established what the Army profession is, what an Army professional is, and what stewardship is, now that we understand that soldiers are stewards of the profession, how do soldiers fill that role of stewards? Well, soldiers fill the role of stewards by doing what soldiers do. Particularly, a big element of stewarding the profession is training. When soldiers are trained to be proficient in their warrior tasks and drills, and how to perform their duties, that is stewardship of the profession. When soldiers are taught the standards that they will have to maintain throughout their Army careers, that is stewardship of the profession. Standards are a very important element of stewardship of the profession. Standards are what have been set by the cumulative effort of the Army. That is the progress that the Army has made throughout its history. And maintaining those standards is quintessential to not losing that progress. But maintaining progress is not the only element of stewardship of the profession. It's also expanding upon what is already there. And that's why professional development is such an important element of stewardship of the profession. That is why the Army is so very insistent that soldiers get schools, that they develop their skills, that they conduct additional training, that they go above and beyond what also is expected of them. It's why the Army harps so importantly on giving education, because that is how soldiers develop themselves as Army professionals. And when an Army professional develops themselves, they develop that Army profession. So, in summary, soldiers are stewards of the Army profession by being soldiers. What are your questions? All right, so the first question is, why be stewards of the profession? Well, if you remember back when I was talking about Valley Forge, when there wasn't that Army profession, it had serious implications for those soldiers who had to go fight that professional army. It is far superior and far better to have that profession already established for those soldiers that will have to go on and fight in the future. All right, do I have any other questions? All right, so my other question is, Where can you learn more about the Army profession and stewardship of the profession? Well, you can look directly in Army Publication 6-22, which is Army Leadership and the Profession. Alright, so no more questions? Alright, I want to thank you for your time, sitting through my brief, and you are dismissed.